I can't hear anything. The first time I heard anything about Ghostwatch was when Mike, my late husband, had been asked to appear in it.
For an actor, it always starts, obviously, with a call from your agent, you know. And I think then, there's this thing come through for a meet for Noddies. It was called Noddies.
You weren't influenced by anything fictional, not at all. I didn't even think about that, to be perfectly frank. My head didn't go there. I just thought, okay, we are presenting a television program as if it's for real.
Ghostwatch is the greatest fan footage movie ever made.
The authenticity of it, using real life presenters, kind of made me think it was safe, and then when it isn't safe, it kind of tricked me as a little kid.
It was a scripted drama piece that the BBC put on in 1992 on Halloween night that was kind of mocked up to be like this live paranormal investigation. Michael Parkinson was hosting it. And the idea was that a camera crew led by Sarah...
That was the basic drama. And I structured it over 6 episodes. And it went all up to the BBC, higher brass, if you like, and Ruth tried to pitch it as a TV series. But the BBC were reluctant to commit to a supernatural 6-parter. So Ruth came back to me, and it's a kind of famous day in a way that I recount. I can remember in a lot of detail where she said, look, we can't do 6 hours, they won't buy it. But look, there's this opportunity to do a screen 1, a 90-minute screen 1. There's a slot going begging. Do you think this concept, Ghostwatch, can be a 90-minute single? And kind of like thinking on my feet, I thought, well, you can't condense 6 hours into an hour and a half. But I thought what we could do is do the last episode, which was always intended to be a live transmission.
It's quite fascinating.
I want to get the language right. What's on now? Crime Watch. Or there's also 999 was on, which was a really interesting discussion that Steve and I had, because I said I can't do 999 because 999 is dramatizing fact.
Dramas were being made on television which were made to look like documentaries. There were handheld cameras, that kind of thing.
And I just can't do fiction presented as fact, dramatized. The layers were just doing my head in. And it just felt, I just couldn't feel how I could keep the authenticity through all those different layers of fact being fiction, being fact being fiction.
The presenters are kind of acting like these things aren't there.
Tropes that go with the outside broadcasting and that kind of thing, like the satellite link up, the phone in and all this kind of thing. They not only keyed into the verisimilitude of an outside broadcast that made the ghost story more believable, but they actually helped the idea of the kind of satirical element of Ghostwatch, which really, if you boil it down to it, is a kind of a gag in a way. Ghostwatch is based on a kind of an absurd premise, which is, you know, the most profound thing that human beings can ponder is the metaphysical, you know, what happens after death. So the gag, I guess, of Ghostwatch is what would the BBC, with all their technical know-how, do to answer that philosophical question that has plagued mankind for as long as we've walked on the earth? What would they do? They turn it into a Saturday night entertainment show. And there's such a kind of absurdity about that contradiction of the...
I think the Blair Witch Project would have existed if it hadn't been for Ghostwatch. Most Haunted, I think that sort of grew out of it. But of course, what Most Haunted doesn't acknowledge is the drama aspect of it. And it's quite interesting to compare, I think, and contrast Ghostwatch as a drama and Most Haunted as a, let's call it a realistic presentation. Because Ghostwatch was set, what made it, I think, so scary for so many people was that it was set in a very ordinary house. It wasn't given a sound bed of a heartbeat. It wasn't given all the tricks that you'd normally apply to a drama. And yet, on Most Haunted and other programs like it, you are setting up the whole realism inside a very dramatic, normally setting, like down here, like in a crypt. You were using camera techniques which will make it seem much more scary.
Because I think it's kind of a little flagpole of 1992 about what television was like then, before the kind of foothills of real heavy-duty reality TV.
The history of Ghostwatch is hard to put a finger on because a lot of people won't admit when they copy Ghostwatch, but I'm going to put my hands up right now and say we took a lot from Ghostwatch for Host, but right at the start of Host, when you see the Zoom logging, the password and the kind of PIN code is 311092, which was Ghostwatch's air date. And obviously there are things that we do with camera movements as well in the later sequences, which are straight out of Ghostwatch. I believe that if it wasn't for Ghostwatch, we wouldn't get things like one of my favorite underrated films ever is Lake Mungo. That is straight out of the Ghostwatch playbook. And I reckon Paranormal Activity wouldn't exist. I know Oren Peli publicly hasn't mentioned it too much, but I've just been told that he does now admit that he is very much influenced by Ghostwatch, and I'm glad he said that because for a long time people didn't even know what Ghostwatch was, especially across the Atlantic.
Confound him.
Yeah, because we were all invited down to, because Ruth Baumgarten, the producer, wanted us off the street because we were supposed to be making a live program, so she didn't want us obvious. So anywhere. Which was sort of nice idea, but I'm sure I was slightly overzealous since we were all in. But yeah, so we all went and had a party at a sailing club in Chiswick, which was great. But Ruth stayed at Television Centre and was witness to some of the storm and the confusion because they had all the TVs up in Television Centre foyer. And
It's like a party. We had all got together after 3 or 4 months of not seeing each other, having lived in each other's pockets for 2 months while we were filming Ghostwatch. And so it was a bit of a cast and crew reunion for a start. I would imagine wine was drunk, and we were feeling very convivial when it came to the transmission time. Kind of nervous, but if ever you've watched a program with lots and lots of people where you've all been a part of it, the shrieks and the screams and the laughs, I mean, that's what was happening, really. So it probably wasn't the same experience that other people were having, watching it perhaps on their own at home. We were all holed up in a big room together, and it was a very enjoyable occasion, actually. And yeah, we just, then when it was finished, there was that thought of, well, gosh, I wonder what happens next. And there it was done. And I think we were all largely really happy. I think we felt it had been a success.
I was so not prepared for the immediate aftermath. I had no idea that people or the press would react as they did. I had absolutely no idea. But I mean, apart from that, as a director, I was totally in the mindset of just getting to transmission. Everything after that is sort of in the lap of the gods. And I was just massively focused on just getting it out there. I mean, it was 2 days before it was transmitted. We had to go back into the edit to put get taken in. So they put on Stephen's name written by on the front of it. So, just 24 hours, 48 hours before it was transmitted, when it'd been long gone, put to bed, we had to get the G-spools out and do things. So that's all I was focused on, really, was, was thought, phew, finished that, great. I didn't think, oh my God, tabloids are going mad.
They tried to protect us from some of it, but obviously there were some tabloids and determined to sort of damn the BBC for doing it. I don't know how you deal with that, really. You just have to ride it out, I suppose.
The BBC was this trusted kind of guardian of the truth, and when I first started getting obsessed with Ghostwatch, I would watch all the documentaries about Ghostwatch that have come out since, and even programs from the time. Like I was watching this. There's this like BBC Bite Back, I think it's called, where it's like the public get to complain about what's been on TV that week, and there's one about Ghostwatch, and everyone is just like horrified at the idea that the BBC would knowingly try and trick us, and the producers are there. The producers are there going like, "Oh no, we never for a minute wanted you to be fooled. This was always meant to be a drama show, just in the mode of a live broadcast." And I just think that's bullshit. I mean, obviously they did, because it was so painstakingly done, and done with such authenticity that obviously that was at the forefront of their mind. At least Leslie Manning and Stephen Volk, they've got such a mischievous streak.
When we were making the drama, when we'd been filming that summer, when we finished, Mike and I made an appointment to go and have a meeting, go and have a chat with Ruth Baumgarten, the producer, because we were both concerned that the reaction would be quite overwhelming.
It was the old style television, because nobody in the higher echelons would get involved. I don't think they'd even read it until the furore of when it went out.
Richard Brooke has since passed away, sadly, but he was very clear that there were weekly, monthly meetings where you could talk about your program, your film, whatever it was that was coming up for TV, and you could flag up that you felt that it was controversial or might need some sort of, thought from the powers that be. And he said every session he'd go, "I've got this thing we're making, I think we should be careful," and they all just went, because he was quite a successful executive producer, and then they were going, "We know you've done Tumbledown, we know you've done this, shut up about your great things." So he said that nobody would listen to him because he had a file that big when it went out and there was backlash, and they went, "You should have been more responsible to Richard." He said, "Here's my file of how I discussed it with the BBC." So I think they were just caught out. Richard Brooke also sent me some email where they actually didn't think the program worked. So they watched it and thought that it wasn't dramatic. So it wasn't dramatic enough. So I don't think they actually understood the realism that I was playing with. I mean, maybe they didn't even get to the end. They just saw Parkinson walking around the studio going, "This is the most haunted house." Because it was a slow burn. I don't know,
I'd just been directed by Judi Dench earlier in the year, and she had left me a message on my answer phone when I got back home saying, "How dare you? You've ruined my evening. You've ruined my evening, Ginny Bev. I thought it was going to be..." And then I saw you doing it, and I thought, well, it can't be. And so, I don't know. I think the reaction that it got was also because a lot of people felt stupid.
And the most memorable phrase is that Auntie broke faith with the nation. So they felt the backlash, I think, was the BBC perceived that the BBC public had been taken for a ride that they weren't happy about because truth was fiction.
It's a shame that the backlash meant that this movie wasn't as widely available, and that it kind of got buried, and that everyone was talking about it in these kind of shameful ways, and the BBC pretended it didn't exist, because I think what Volk and Manning were doing is what like revitalized horror 20 years later, and they were doing it back in '92, and they were doing it better than filmmakers are doing it now.
The way that they manipulated the audience and manipulated the news headlines, now, if it was done now, I think it would be celebrated. I think it'd be something like the Blair Witch Project used. They manipulated the conventions of the genre, and it kind of turned into massive box office and massive fame. But because this was slightly earlier and it was on terrestrial TV and before the internet, they couldn't do it, didn't it? This should have been something that just launched Leslie and Stephen into the stratosphere and launched Ghostwatch into a household name worldwide. But I feel like it's only recently that people are starting to appreciate what they did.
You start to watch it and you're like, okay, it's probably not going to be scary by modern standards. It's going to be antiquated. And I remember watching it and just like about half an hour in, just going and turning on the lights and just being like, okay, it's got me. And it hadn't, like, not that I bought into it being real or anything like that, because I knew the story, but it's really smartly done, and it's got a real authenticity to it.
People expected it to be a kind of grandstand match of the day live thing, I think. And everybody sat round as a family thinking, ooh, this is going to be good. You know, not really probably expecting much.
A 20th century, a late 20th century audience is far more au fait with the tricks that filmmakers can do. So in the early 90s, we should have realized that this was not real, but there were so many people that just believed it to be real. And that's just down to Leslie and Stephen just being absolutely goats in the horror game.
I don't think I'd be sitting here all these decades on if something didn't work for an audience. And it's impossible to say whether audiences really like something for TV. You know, you sit on your settee, you watch it and you think, well, I did my best. And then you, you know, make a cup of tea. It's like, it's quite difficult to know how audiences really respond. But as I say, I'm sitting here now, decades on, so hopefully something worked.
Stephen is sort of saying, be careful what you see, because he was like predicting fake news, wasn't he, really? And that is the genius of it. That's the genius of the writing, that he was streets ahead of anybody. That things can be manipulated.
It's a weird time capsule because it's meant to be, it's in the mode of those slightly cheesy, slightly tacky 90s panorama style live broadcasts. That all the stuff that's antiquated about it is actually what makes it so unique.
There was a wonderful thing for me of passing on the baton, because I feel that I was inspired by Nigel Neal, and then other people have been inspired by Ghostwatch. So there's a kind of continuity, which is a wonderful thing about horror being reinvented by other people, you know. And people like Rob Savage made Host, as you know, which is a great success, and you know, so it goes on. And the next thing will be something that neither I nor Rob Savage will anticipate that somebody else will come up with, that we don't know what's going to be. So the future is horror, you know.
Its themes today, I think, like massively relevant to what's going on now. You know, fake news. Stephen always said this is a drama about, you know, you can't believe what's on TV. You can't, and you can't trust what you see on TV and read it as fact. On the front of the script, he wrote a quote from John Waite about Terry Waite and said, who was still in captivity, and the quote said, I'll believe it when I see it on TV.
It's got a life of its own, the programme. That's what will keep people watching.
I mean, in this studio, this totally deserted studio, autocue's working. Round and round the garden, like a teddy bear.
my sister.